Before we drop the green flag on breaking boundaries, Victory Lane Wellness is spotlighting a real-world motorsports problem. Sometimes your diet is determined by the road, the race schedule, or whatever food is available at the track. And when gluten, dairy, or processed foods sneak in, digestive stress can steal your focus, your energy, and your comfort when you need them the most. This week, our partner Equilife is giving away a free bottle of gluten and dairy support enzyme on all qualifying orders. Gluten and dairy support is designed to help your body break down challenging foods and reduce GI distress when perfect eating is not possible. The offer ends soon, so click the link in the show notes or visit victorylanewellness.com to get your free bottle today. Now enjoy the program. What if chronic pain is not just a local problem? What if that sore shoulder, that stiff lower back, that cranky wrist, those achy knees, or that neck that feels like it was assembled by an angry raccoon is not only about the joint? What if pain was actually the dashboard light? But inflammation is the wiring behind the dashboard trying to handle too much current. Today we're talking about chronic pain in motorsports. Drivers, pit crew athletes, crew chiefs, mechanics, team owners, and executives, because pain does not care what role that you play. If you are constantly traveling, you're under stress, you're sitting in awkward positions, you're climbing in and out of cars, you're jumping over walls, leaning over engines, you're carrying equipment, working late nights, sleeping poorly, eating track and airport food, and living under pressure, this episode is for you, because eventually the body starts sending invoices. And one of the most expensive invoices is chronic pain. Now, there are some exciting therapies out there, and today we'll explain what two of those are and where they might fit and why they can be useful tools. But we're also going to ask a better question. Before you spend precious time and money chasing pain locally, have you actually measured the one systemic marker that may be keeping that pain alive? Because the most overlooked starting point may not be the fancy device. It may just be exactly what we're sharing in today's episode. So be sure to listen through to the checkered flag. Let's go green. Hello, I'm Jeffrey Mort. If you're like most in NASCAR's top tiers, drivers, crews, owners, or executives, while you're busy chasing podiums, have you fully considered who's taking care of you? Right here, you're about to start transforming your mind and body for peak race day performance with High Performance Health, designed exclusively for the demands of NASCAR. As a certified high-performance health coach and consulting hypnotist, I've coached elite entrepreneurs and athletes to higher energy, sharper focus, and greater resilience, naturally, safely, and backed by science. And right now, I'm bringing that same engineered approach to the best in motorsports. Here you'll find no wasted time, just a unique blend of integrative health, mental conditioning, and proven recovery strategies delivered in plain language that you can use right away. Imagine a season without burnout, brain fog, or the costly crash of your health. Because the truth is, the real race starts within. I'm grateful you're here. Yes, welcome back to Breaking Boundaries for Champions, the only high-performance health podcast built specifically for motorsports professionals. I'm your host, Jeffrey Mort, your personal high-performance health engineer and founder of Victory Lane Wellness. And if you're serious about protecting your energy, recovery, focus, career, and longevity, and your legacy, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. Today we're talking about chronic pain, not as a medical diagnosis, not as a treatment plan, and not even as a replacement for your doctor, your physical therapist, your chiropractor, your orthopedic specialist, or your qualified medical team. We're talking about the high performance health side of pain, the terrain, the inflammatory load, the recovery capacity, the root level physiology that influences how the body responds to stress, strain, impact, and repair. Because in motorsports, chronic pain is not just discomfort, it is a performance threat. It affects your sleep, your focus, reaction time, your recovery, your mood, your decision making, training consistently, and especially your leadership. And for crew chiefs and executives, it can affect patience, clarity, communication, and the ability to stay composed when the race weekend starts throwing flaming puzzle pieces at you. Pain is not just physical, pain changes the whole operating system. Now, I get it. Most people think that chronic pain is only a local problem. The knee hurts, so it must be the knee. The shoulder hurts, so it must be the shoulder. The wrist hurts, so it must be the wrist. The back hurts, so it must be the back. You get it. And sometimes that is true. Local injury matters. However, alignment, tissue damage, nerve irritation, overuse, strength imbalances, mobility, and biomechanics, they all matter. If something is torn, compressed, fractured, unstable, or medically serious, yes, of course, you need the right medical evaluation. But here is where the conversation gets even more interesting. Why does one person recover quickly while another stays inflamed for months? Why does one driver have soreness after a race weekend while another driver feels like their body got repossessed? Why does one pit crew athlete bounce back after training or getting hit by a car on pit lane while another carries pain all week long? And why does one crew chief wake up stiff and foggy and inflamed after travel while another seems to keep moving? Now, I know what you're thinking. Many say that it's just aging. But if that were true, all 40-year-old people in the industry would perform similarly. And we already know that that's not how it works. That is where we have to look beyond the painful area. What if chronic pain is not always the root problem? What if chronic pain is often the signal? And what if that signal is telling us that the body is struggling with inflammation, with things like nutrient deficiency, poor recovery, blood sugar instability, stress load, oxidative stress in particular, poor sleep, or something that we're going to dive deeper into today, fatty acid imbalance. In other words, the painful joint may be where the smoke is coming out, but the fire may be systemic. And that changes the strategy like a caution lap with 5 to go. Because if the body is inflamed everywhere, treating one painful area may help locally, but it may not address why the body keeps producing pain signals in the first place. And that's why I want to talk about two technologies. One is called SoftWave, and the other one is similarly called StemWave. And one important biomarker after those that we're going to talk about today. These first two therapies are very interesting. They can be extremely valuable, but they should not distract us from the root level conversation. So let's keep this simple. Both soft wave and stem wave are commonly discussed in the broader world of what is known as acoustic wave or shock wave style therapy. So these therapies use sound or pressure waves to mechanically stimulate tissue in the body. The idea is to create a local biological response in the area being treated. That's the concept of those two modalities, those therapies. Depending on the technology, depending on the provider, and of course the settings and the application, these tools may be used in conversations around pain and inflammation, or even circulation and tissue recovery and mobility and even muscular skeletal issues. Now, or I should say, and although these tools have a time and a place, I want to be very clear. This is not a magic wand, although it kind of looks like one. This is not a Harry Potter wand for your elbow. And despite some of the marketing language you may see floating around online, this is not the same thing as injecting stem cells. Stem wave does not mean someone putting stem cells into your knee with a leaf blower. And soft wave does not mean that your shoulder becomes 20 years younger by Thursday. These are what is called local technologies intended to stimulate a response in the tissue. And that can be very useful for some situations, but it's still local. And local tools work best when the systemic biologic environment is supportive. So, what's the difference? Soft wave versus stem wave. Soft wave is often abbreviated ESWT, and that's short for extracorporeal shockwave therapy. You can understand why we abbreviate that. And it's using acoustic or shock waves to actually stimulate the tissue and support the body's natural recovery processes. So it's very targeted and it speeds things up. But it's a little more broad than stem wave. Stem wave, it's typically described as non-invasive acoustic wave therapy technology. And it's designed to create more focused mechanical stimulation and support local circulation and recovery response. So, in simple terms, soft wave therapy is generally positioned as the broader, more surface area acoustic wave option, and it's often used when you want to stimulate a larger region like low back or shoulder or knee or hip issues. Stem wave, however, is typically positioned as the more focused, deeper pinpoint mechanical stimulation option, often used when you want to target a more specific pain point like a tendon or a ligament attachment, plantar fascia spot, an elbow or wrist, or localized joint irritation. So soft wave is like aiming a fan at the corner of the garage where the smoke is coming from, where stem wave is more like pointing the diagnostic light at the exact wire that keeps sparking. Both may be useful, but neither replaces checking why the whole system is inflamed in the first place. And that's the mistake. Do not confuse local recovery tools with a root cause strategy. You can kind of think of chronic pain like a fire alarm. Soft wave or stem wave may be like sending the fire department crew to the room where the alarm is the loudest. That can be very helpful, but what if there is smoke throughout the whole building? What if the wiring is overloaded? What if the ventilation system is spreading the problem? And what if the entire structure is under stress? That is systemic inflammation. And this is where many high performers get stuck. They keep chasing the loudest alarm, the shoulder, the back, the knee, the wrist, the neck, the hip. But nobody checks the control panel. Nobody checks the inflammatory environment, and nobody checks things like the omega-3 index or the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and nobody checks the arachidonic acid to EPA ratio. Nobody checks whether the body has the raw materials to resolve inflammation properly. That, my friends, is the high performance health gap. So let's bring this back to motorsports. For drivers, chronic pain can affect steering input or braking confidence, neck endurance, focus late in the race, reaction time, sleep quality, which kind of affects everything, patience on the racetrack during the race, and the ability to recover between race weekends. And as we're approaching right now, mid-season, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, that is important because burnout and these chronic issues don't happen at the end of the season. They start to happen throughout the season. Now, for pit crew athletes, chronic pain can affect that explosive movement, or landing mechanics, or shoulder stability, or grip strength, which is a key indicator for longevity, their sprint speed, their accuracy, and training consistency. And for crew chiefs, for owners and executives, chronic pain can affect travel, can affect sleep, can affect mood, focus, communication, and especially decision making and leadership and the ability to show up sharp when pressure is the highest. Pain pulls bandwidth, and pain steals attention. Pain is like having a browser tab open on your nervous system that refuses to close. And eventually, that background drain affects performance. Now, let's talk inflammation. Inflammation, it's not the enemy. You need inflammation. Inflammation is part of healing. If tissue is damaged, the body uses inflammation to send resources to that area. So the problem is not inflammation itself. The problem is unbalanced inflammation. The problem is chronic inflammation, inflammation that does not shut off, inflammation that keeps the body in a low grade repair mode without ever fully completing the job. Think of inflammation like the safety crew. Of course, you want the safety crew to show up after a wreck. You do not want the safety crew parked in turn 3 for 88 laps with cones everywhere blocking the race. The goal is not to eliminate the safety crew or inflammation in this case. The goal is balanced inflammation. A healthy inflammatory response should activate, do the job, and then calm down. The resolution process depends heavily on what I mentioned earlier, fatty acid balance. And this is where omega-3 status becomes one of the most overlooked pieces in chronic pain. Most people have heard that omega-3s are good for inflammation, but that phrase gets thrown around so much it starts to sound like wellness confetti. Let's make it useful. Omega-3 fatty acids, especially EPA and DHA, are incorporated into the cell membranes, and they influence how the body produces inflammatory and resolving signals. Omega-6 fatty acids, they're not bad. You need omega-6s too, and there's more omegas than just 3s and 6s. But the problem is balance, and especially between those two, the 3s and the 6s. Modern diets often provide lots of omega-6 fats through things like processed oils, fried foods, packaged foods, restaurant and travel foods. Not a good balance. Really is not a good balance. And meanwhile, many people are not getting enough EPA and DHA from things like fatty fish or high quality supplementation. So the inflammatory environment becomes a little bit tilted and more towards the 6s than the 3s. And for motorsports professionals, that matters because your body is constantly operating in a pro-inflammatory state. Chronic pain may be louder, recovery may be slower, sleep may be worse, and tissue resilience may suffer. And this is why guessing can be costly because you cannot feel your arachidonic acid to EPA ratio. You cannot eyeball your omega-3 index from the hauler snack drawer. And I've seen that snack drawer, my friends. We need to talk. And you cannot look in the mirror and say, yep, my cell membranes look about 8% today. And you can't even track it on, a fitness tracker. This is not how this works. So how do we know? Well, we test right from home or from the track. And before chasing every local therapy, before spending hours on appointments or thousands of dollars on devices, before trying to foam roll your IT band into another dimension, here's what I would recommend as a foundational first step to measure your omega-3 and inflammation status. At Victory Lane Wellness, we use the omega-3 and inflammation test. There's actually 2 tests that we use, and this is a simple at-home finger stick test. Both tests are that way. Just a quick finger stick, a couple of drops of blood on a card. You let it dry, mail it to the lab. I get the results, or a certified practitioner on our team gets the results. And it can measure key markers such as omega-3 index, omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, arachidonic acid to EPA ratio. These are all important. And the more expanded test, I said there's 2. There's a simplified one. And then the more expanded test measures other fatty acid patterns, depending on the test, of course. And you might be wondering, why does this matter? Well, because now we are no longer guessing whether inflammation balance may be part of the problem. We have the data. And what is not measured, as I always say, cannot be optimized. This applies to more than just pain, though. So you're going to be surprised that it's also an invaluable marker for coronary heart disease. And in my honest opinion, more important than the cholesterol marker, the LDL marker that you see all the hype about online. And of course, your doctor wants to have your LDL cholesterol at a certain level, and that's important too. But as I said, in my opinion, this is an invaluable marker for heart health and especially longevity. If your omega-3 status is low and your inflammatory ratio is out of balance, that is a foundational issue. Not a fancy issue, not a trending issue. It's a foundational issue. And foundational issues deserve attention before we ask the body to perform expensive miracles. So let's talk about omega-3 supplements. I don't think I have any here. Because this is where people make a huge mistake. They hear fish oil and they grab the cheapest bottle they can find at the grocery store or their local pharmacy or, that popular next day online delivery service. Please don't do that. That bottle may have been sitting under fluorescent lights since the last time someone thought skinny jeans were a good idea. Just like NASCAR, in the IHP world, high quality actually means something. A high quality omega-3 should be several things. It should be third-party tested for heavy metals, third-party tested for contaminants like PCBs and dioxins, sourced from smaller fish. The most popular is anchovies, or I should say the most effective, but also sardines and mackerel, wherever possible. You might see some that are sourced from mussels or sourced from plant-based materials. Those aren't as good. It needs to be fresh and protected from oxidation. So you want to make sure that the packaging is correct. You want to check for the expiration date. Make sure it's within the date. Low in rancidity markers. You won't always find that on the bottle, but clearly labeled with actual, this is important now, actual EPA and DHA amounts, not just fish oil in milligrams. You want to look for a 2-to-1 ratio of EPA to DHA, so that's 2 times more EPA than DHA. And preferably, you want it what's called TG bound or triglyceride form, triglyceride meaning TG, for another highly absorbable form. So that just means it's better absorbed by the body. And then concentrated enough to reach a meaningful dose without taking half of the bottle. So what are we looking for here? About 2 grams per serving is the clinical dosage. And all of the recommendations that we make in functional medicine is based on research. It's based on science. It's based on clinical dosage. That's why I always say science-backed supplementation. So about 2 grams per serving is the clinical dosage for most adults. Omega-3 supplementation. It's also safe for children, ages 3 and up usually, but it's dosed per weight of the child. And usually for children, we would use the liquid form rather than the capsules, depending on the weight. Manufactured by a company willing to provide transparency. That is important, and quality assurance. Nothing. One of my peeves, I should say, I don't want to say nothing bothers me more, but one of my peeves is when I do some investigation or research on a particular supplement that maybe a client shares with me or something new on the market, and I go to the website and I have to hunt and search for the product label, for the nutritional facts label that it tells me the ingredients and the dosage that's in there, or maybe it's not even on their website whatsoever. That's an immediate no for me. If there's not immediate transparency in a company, then that's a no for me in my practice. You also want to look for GMP certification. GMP stands for Good Manufacturing Process, and ideally tested for purity, for potency, and oxidation. Because low-quality fish oil, listen to this, low-quality fish oil can actually become part of the problem. Rancid oil is not recovery nutrition. That is inflammation, wearing a trench coat, throwing sand in your motor oil. We all know how that story ends up. When we recommend omega-3 support, we're not looking for the cheapest fish oil. We're looking for clean, tested, potent, absorbable EPA and DHA that support and actually helps move the needle. And how do we know if it moves the needle? We go back to that testing. We test, we work the program, right? Every test that we do, every at-home functional test, every at-track functional test that we perform, whether it's within a coaching package or an individual test, if somebody just wants to know their omega-3s, it comes with a plan specific for that person's biology. Due to regulations, I can't link up supplements here on the podcast, but you can find all of my recommendations at jeffmort.com/shop. That's JEFFMORT.com/shop. And I also want to make another point here. To be clear, food still matters. You can't out supplement a bad diet. I love a food first approach, especially for my clients, my family, myself. Fatty fish can be excellent. Wild caught salmon, sardines, anchovies, mackerel, herring, these all travel well and can provide EPA and DHA directly. And actually, I've had some clients that did not need supplementation because they ate those 4 to 5 times per week. It was actually someone that ate sardines 4 to 5 times a week. And I know that's not for everybody, but this particular client did, and they had their omega-3 balanced, I should say, just through diet and nutrition alone. So those are some options. Always wild caught, never farm raised, wild caught salmon, sardines, anchovies, mackerel, herring. Those are all amazing. And then, of course, plant sources like flax and chia and walnuts, those are beneficial too, but they're not going to move the needle like the fatty fish will. They mainly provide ALA, which is linolenic acid, which has to then convert to EPA and then DHA. And that conversion can be limited and takes other cofactors, such as vitamins and minerals and energy, more importantly. And I'm here to save you steps, and I'm here to save you energy. So for people with chronic pain, high inflammatory load, low omega-3 index, or poor AA to EPA ratio, food alone might not be enough to move the needle quickly. And that's where high quality supplements can be useful. But again, test first, supplement strategically, retest, and that's the loop. Measure, support, remeasure, optimize. And that's how high performers should approach inflammation. So after we address the systemic terrain, where do SoftWave and StemWave fit? Well, they may fit as local tools. If somebody has chronic tendon pain, joint pain, soft tissue irritation, or a stubborn area that's not responding well, these therapies might be worth discussing with a qualified provider. They may help stimulate local circulation and tissue response short term. They may help support recovery in a targeted area immediately. And they may be useful as part of the broader plan involving the physical therapy, the mobility work, strength training, nutrition, sleep, hydration, and of course, inflammation balance. But again, they're not the whole plan. They are a tool, a very interesting tool, but a tool. And you would not rebuild a race car with only a torque wrench. You need the whole pit box. You need the telemetry. You need the data. And same thing here. SoftWave and StemWave may be one tool or two tools in the recovery pit box, but omega-3 testing and inflammation balance help you to understand whether the entire shop is on fire. And that is the difference. So at our private wellness practice, Victory Lane Wellness, we use the same 5R thinking: the reveal, the remove, the replace, the rebalance, and retain. First, we reveal what's happening. Omega-3 and inflammation test, minerals and metals test, stress, mood, and metabolism test, and in most instances, gut and metabolic testing, when appropriate, I should say. And then we remove the things driving the inflammation, the inflammatory oils, the fried and ultra-processed foods, the food sensitivities. That's another important test that we haven't talked about much lately. Poor sleep patterns, blood sugar instability, environmental toxicities, which are so prevalent at the racetrack, especially for the people involved in racing, whether it's the drivers, the crew members, or the safety team. Excess alcohol, of course, chronic stress loops, those can all add to inflammation. And then replace what's missing. The high quality omega-3, of course, nutrition first, and then magnesium and vitamin D3, daily foundation nutrition, protein, antioxidants, healthy fats, electrolytes. Targeted support is needed. And then, of course, we want to rebalance the system with sleep, with hydration, with nervous system regulation, movement, mobility, strength, recovery technology. And then where most programs fail, we want to retain the performance. We want something that is sustainable. And of course, we want to retest and adjust. We want to track that pain, track that sleep, track that recovery and performance, because the goal is not just less pain. The goal is better function continuously, better resilience, better recovery, better performance, and a longer career with fewer pain-driven compromises. If it's one thing I hear over and over again from the senior folk, and I'm not saying, 65, 70 years old, I'm saying the the older drivers that are 40 years old, 35 years old plus, or the crew chiefs that are in their 40s or even 50s, is their bodies are just aching week after week in this compounds with interest over the course of the season, over the course of their career. And it doesn't have to be that way, my friends. So to be crystal clear, I'm not giving medical advice, and I don't claim to diagnose, treat, or cure disease. If you're dealing with that chronic pain, injury, nerve system, symptoms, severe pain, weakness, numbness, trauma, or any medical condition, of course you want to work with your qualified medical team. So that said, here is the practical action plan for this week, something that you can put into action this week. Number one, stop calling chronic pain normal. Common is not the same as normal. Let's not normalize things that are just simply common, such as pain. Number two, get evaluated if pain is severe, persistent, worsening, neurological, traumatic, or limiting your function. Don't play hero with red flags. And then number three, measure inflammation. This is something that can be done this week. Start with an omega-3 and inflammation test. Number four, upgrade your omega-3 intake. Food first, then high-quality third-party tested omega-3 support when appropriate. Number five, clean up the biggest inflammatory inputs. Things like fried foods, processed oils, ultra-processed snacks, high sugar intake, poor sleep, especially alcohol. I know I'm not going to go deep into that one. I'll just leave that one there. And of course, unmanaged stress is another thing to clean up that causes inflammation. Number six, consider those local tools. The infrared sauna is actually my highest recommended tool. We have one that actually fits right in your bus. PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic frequency tools, or a mat, is actually my next highest tech suggestion. You can put that in your sauna, and just in 20 minutes per session, you can get some amazing healing and recovery, and that's completely portable as well, a little more portable than the sauna. And then consider things like the SoftWave technology or the StemWave technology. And of course, don't rule out physical therapy, mobility, strength training, red light therapy, which is also included in that infrared sauna, and PEMF. Very important. Body work is important. When I say body work, I'm talking about structural chiropractic adjustments. I'm talking about massage therapy, craniosacral therapy, super helpful. But don't skip the terrain, because local pain tools work better when the body is not stuck in a systemic inflammatory traffic jam trying to leave the racetrack. All right, the white flag's out. Here's the final lap. SoftWave and StemWave can be very interesting tools. They may support local tissue recovery. They may be useful for certain pain patterns. They may have a place in the performance recovery conversation. But if chronic pain is being amplified by systemic inflammation, and you never measure your omega-3 status, and you never look at fatty acid balance, and you keep eating the same inflammatory foods, and you sleep poorly, and you live on stress hormones, then you may be chasing smoke while ignoring the fire. Chronic pain is not just a joint conversation. It is an inflammation conversation, a recovery conversation, and a cellular health conversation, and of course, a high-performance health conversation. So before you ask, which device should I try, ask, what does my inflammatory terrain look like? Because what is not measured cannot be optimized. If you're the kind of person who's serious about optimizing performance at the root level, apply to work with Victory Lane Wellness at victorylanewellness.com, with programs built for drivers, pit crew athletes, crew chiefs, and team owners committed to precision, to resilience, and legacy. And every enrollment supports Race for a Reason, our give back program providing advanced functional testing for chronically ill children through racing related charities. We will see you in Victory Lane. Bye-bye. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Breaking Boundaries for Champions. Before you head out, here's one more way to level up your game both on and off the track. We're excited to team up with Therasage to bring you the Thera H2 Go Plus, a next-level hydrogen water bottle designed to keep you hydrated at the cellular level. This isn't just water, it's clean, natural, and science-backed hydration that fits right into your high-performance lifestyle. So if you're the kind of person who's ready to fuel your cells like a true champion, grab yours now. The link is in the show notes and use code VICTORY for your exclusive offer. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep breaking those boundaries.